Okay, so today what we're going to do is very similar to yesterday. Yesterday we were looking at dividing polynomials. So when we were dividing polynomials, we just had a number down here and we took it out and divided. And so for example, this question right here, we would get 12x4 divided by 4 would give us 3x cubed for this division. And this division we get plus 2 when we divide our numbers, and x squared when we divide our letters. The only difference between today and yesterday is now you have to figure out what that number is that divides by both numbers or all three or all the numbers up top. So that's called your GCF. So the GCF has two parts. It has a number part and then it has the letter part. And you need to think of them separately and then put them together for a single polynomial or monomial in this case. And so we're going to go and do that. Now, what we do though is we're going to write a multiplication statement. So we are going to we're going to change this so it has two factors. One of them will be your GCF up front, and the other one will be the remainder for the division. Okay? And so really what we have is we have a factor times another factor. And the one up front is called your GCF factor, and the one in the brackets is your remainder. So that's what we're going to do today. Let's get started, shall we? So for the GCF of numbers, you got to ask yourself, what is the largest number I can divide each of these three numbers by? And give you an easy one to start. 7 can only divide by one other number, and that's 7. So yes, this one's divisible by 7, divisible by 7, divisible by 7. So your GCF then would equal 7. Now, 15, 10, and 25, most of you can probably guess it. But what if you can't? Well, what are factors of 15? 1 and 15, 3 and 5. And what are factors of 10? Well, 1 and 10, 2 and 5. And what are factors of 25? Well, 1 and 25, and then 5 and 5. Although the same one, I'll write it twice. Well, as you can see, the largest one, they all have 1 in common, and they all have 5 in common. Which one's larger? 5. So if you're kind of stuck on the GCF, you can work on it by figuring out all the factors of a number and then comparing them. That way, GCF, you can find your GCF, the largest factor. Notice that your GCF is always the same or smaller than all the numbers. Okay. Later on, we're going to talk about the lowest common multiple. So it's good to note that the GCF is always smaller because it's a factor. It's the greatest factor. What about 16, 24, and 32? I know 2 works for all of them. I know 4 works for all of them. Is there another larger number? Let's see. 6 works for 24, but it doesn't work for 32 or 16. So then 6 is not one. What about 7? Doesn't work for all of them. What about 8? 8 works for, 8 works for all of them. So it could be 8. Let's see. What about 10, 12? No, 12 only works for 24. 9 doesn't work for a lot. 8 doesn't, well, it works. 11, 12, 13, no. 14, no. 15, no. 16, good. Nothing above 16 will work, so don't go any higher. So 8 is your GCF. Now, I just showed you 3 methods, okay? 3 methods. Number 1, number 1 is just by inspection. So you can look at it. In a simple question like the first one, it's pretty simple to do, okay? Method number 2 is you list the factors. You list all the factors. And I did that for question number 2, okay, or question B. And then the last one, what you're going to do, number 3, is the guess and check. UES, guess and check. And that's what I did to find the answer for C, or number 3. Okay, I guessed and checked all the different numbers, but of course, educated guesses and educated guesses. Okay, sorry, educated guesses and educated checks. All right, you try the next two. Go, I'll give you a second. Okay, so here we go. 24, 36, and 40. I believe our GCF is 4. Okay, so your GCF equals 4. And that's because just from guessing and checking. All right, 9 doesn't work, 8 doesn't work, and 6 doesn't work. So 4 is your answer. But you'll notice that sometimes, often, 2 of them will work. For example, 6 works for both of those ones, but it does not work for that one. Okay, what about 28, 42, and 70? Take a guess, guess and check. 7 works. Okay, and what about 14? Well, 14 works, maybe. Let's go 42 divided by 14. Yeah, what about 70 divided by 14? It works. So guess what? 7 is a factor, but 14 is your greatest common factor. Notice for this guess and check, I used a calculator for higher numbers. When we do another unit, we'll get more info, but for this unit, your GCFs will be simpler. So that is our numbers, finding your GCF for numbers. Now, for the letters, what you want to do is you have to find a letter that's in all the numbers, and then you choose the lowest power. So I have an M and an M. That means my GCF must have the letter N. Which one is the lowest? Okay, so that's the lowest. That's why I use n cubed, because n cubed can be divided out of each of them. Notice I have an N and an N, so that is part of the GCF. And the lowest number is a 2, so there's my GCF, okay? My GCF is m cubed n squared. It can divide into both the numbers. Number 2, well, 7 and 48. Can you divide 48 by 7? Just double check if you're unsure. Oops, clear. 48 divided by 7. Doesn't work. So G7 is not part of the GCF. The GCF would be the number 1. Okay? Now look at your letters. We have an X in both of them. What's the lowest exponent? A 2. Look at the Y. There's a Y in both of them. What's the lowest exponent? A 2. So you got to use the lowest, right? Use the lowest exponent. Good. Now these are getting into some harder ones here. Now we have 28 and 40, so there's definitely a GCF for the numbers. So we look at the numbers separately than the letters. I believe 7 doesn't work for 40, but 4 works for both of them, so our GCF would be 4. X is in both, and the lowest exponent is a 2. Y is in both, and the lowest exponent is a 1, which we don't have to write. And on letter Z, which is in both of them, the lowest exponent is a 1, which we don't have to write. So that's our GCF. 4x squared yz. It's quite a complicated term. Next one. Now you'll notice there's 2 negative signs. So yeah, you will get a negative GCF. Then we have 18 and 24. What works? 2 works. 3 works. 4 doesn't work for 18. 5, no. 6, yeah, 6 works for both of them. 7, no. 8, no. 9, 8 works for 24, but not 18. And 9 works for 18, but not 24. What about 10? No. 11, no. 12 works only for 24. 13, no. Okay, we're getting ridiculous. So the highest one that we had was 6. Now, there's no W over here, so there is no W in your GCF. But we have an X in both, and an X in both, and the lowest exponent is a 3. We have a Y in both, and the lowest exponent is a 1. So that is our GCF, negative 6x cubed YW. Okay, before we begin factoring GCFs, which I think you're ready to do, let's go into factoring versus simplifying. So for factoring, for simplifying, what that means is to multiply in, right? You multiply in, and what happens to your brackets? You remove them. Okay, so you remove brackets by multiplying. Okay, I'm not sure if I spelled multiplying properly there. Sorry if I screwed that up. But what about factoring? Now factoring is going the opposite, right? Here's your product, and here are your two factors. But when you're factoring, you're going from your product and changing it into your factors. So it's like you're working backwards. So simplifying would be like 2 times 3 equals 6. Factoring is like 6 equals 2 times 3. So what you're doing here is you are creating brackets. Okay. You're creating brackets, and so what you're left with is a multiplication statement. Actually, I don't like that. Let's just say here we're creating brackets. So essentially what you're doing is you are dividing. Okay. But you'll notice that there's an equal sign. So the left equals the right. And you've got to be able to go back and forth. For both of them, the start is the finish is a result of the start. The start is a result of the finish. They are equal. So let's do a little bit of practice. Find the GCF, divide the GCF, and raise a product. Okay, so the polynomial is a product. And it's a product of the GCF and the remainder, which goes in brackets. All right, here we go. We got this. So 6 and 18, what's the largest number? Well, you can divide them both by 6. So remember from yesterday, that's like 6x divided by 6 and minus 18 divided by 6. So what do we get? Well, when we divide, our remainder is x minus 3. And that would be fine for yesterday's work, but then what you got to do is you got to remember to write your GCF in front. So now what we have is a multiplication statement, and this equals what? If you multiplied it, it would equal 6x minus 18. And that's exactly what we started with. Okay, so you got to understand that what your answer is, and our answer is this, 6 bracket x minus 3 bracket. That answer equals 6x minus 18. It equals what we started with. Next one. So again, 6 is your number, but what about your letters? Well, the lowest exponent is a squared, so your GCF would be 6x squared. So you can go straight to the answer. Do your first division, and you would get x. Do your second division, and you get negative 3x. 6x squared divided by that is a 1. So we get 1 minus 3x, and 6x squared goes up front. Okay, so then you multiply in, and you get what we started with. Okay, that was a little bit of a weird one with that 1 up front, but that is possible. When you divide perfectly, you divide to 1. Let's go up here. Now we have 10, 15, and 5. Often one of your GCFs is one of the number. So let's divide this whole thing by 5. And what about our letters? Cubed, squared, exponent 1. So we're going to use the smallest one, exponent 1. So again, you could write this as 10z cubed minus 15z squared plus 5z. And each one is divided by 5z. That is legit. Okay. Each term gets divided. So your remainder then, our GCF always goes here. Okay. And your remainder goes in the brackets. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Whoops, that looks a lot like z, doesn't it? 2z squared Divide 15 divided by 5 would be -3 because there's a subtraction sign. Remember, subtractions are negatives. I do say them both ways. And we're left with a z. Then when the things divide perfectly, they divide into a 1. Okay, so 3 divided by 3 equals 1. 5 divided by 5 equals 1. And same thing, 5z divided by 5z equals 1. So keep that in mind. Watch out. I absolutely will put that in a quiz and a test. Okay, next one, a little bit more complicated, just with the numbers. What are we going to divide by? What's the GCF? 14, 21, 28. Those are all multiples of 7. And what about the letter? There's a letter in all of them. The smallest number, squared. So before you begin, let's write our GCF here so you don't forget it. And you can do your division. 14 divided by 7 is 2. x5 divided by x squared is x cubed. -21 divided by 7 is 3. X cubed divided by x squared is x. And 28 divided by 7 is 4. X squared divided by x squared is 1. And 1 times 4 is 4. Okay, so this last division is a little bit weird. Often it does end up with no letter, just a number. Okay. Now some more complicated letters. Sometimes you just got to watch your exponents. 18, 12, -12, and 6. So you're definitely going to have a GCF of 6. There's an m in all of them, smallest exponent. N in all of them, smallest exponent is a 1. So again, set up your brackets, write your GCF up front so you don't forget about it. Then divide. 18 divided by 6 is 3. M cubed divided is m minus 2. Divide, we'll get n, and then this one will be plus 1 again. Okay. Now what's really curious here, remember your m, you have m squared divided by m squared, that equals 1. So technically you would have a -2 times a 1 times the letter n, and that simply equals -2n. Okay, just want to emphasize how that works. Number 6, go for it, give it a shot. What's really interesting here is this. The very front term, right, has a negative sign. So the front term is negative. 99% of the time, you're going to then have a negative GCF. Okay, when you have a front term that's negative, we're looking at a negative GCF, and what you got to be careful of is your signs. So watch signs, you got to be extra careful, go slow so you don't screw it up. So I think it's 2. There's a higher one, 4. Yes, 4 is the highest. So -4x, and what about your y's? There we go. So this you want to be high as you can, whereas this has to be as low as possible. Kind of weird, it's how it works. Okay, so now, before I even get going, what am I going to do? I'm going to write my brackets out. I'm going to put my GCF up front. So -12 divided by -4 is +3, x squared. -20 divided by -4 is +5, y. And -16 divided by -4 is +4, xy. And this is the cool part with a negative GCF. The reason why you really know it's negative is that everything in here is simpler. Okay? Easier signs. And really, for a negative GCF, it's nicer and prettier to have that first term a positive sign. Okay? And that's a big clue in taking out the GCF being a negative. Okay, here's a little bit kind of weird questions. This is kind of working backwards from yesterday. Here's like your GCF. So you're dividing everything by a plus 3b. And so what you're left with in brackets is you're left with 5x minus 9y, and your GCF goes up front like it always has. Okay? But You could also write it like this: 5x minus 9y times a plus 3b. Okay, this is the exact same answer. It's just like 4 times 3, 3 times 4. Okay, both of these equal 12. So it doesn't matter the order of your answer, it's all exactly the same. Okay, any questions about that? All right. Next one. So now you have 3 terms all being divided by y minus 4. Okay, so we can go y minus 4, and the remainder is in brackets, 3x squared minus 2x plus 8. Sometimes people like to write it the other way. Your choice on whether it goes at the front or the back. So this is exactly the same as bracket 3x squared minus 2x plus y times y minus 4. Exactly the same. All right. Factor GCF using the tiles, a little bit weird, this one. This one, I would have the number 3 here, and this would be the length of x plus 1, 2, 3. So I would say here 3x squared plus 9 equals 3 bracket x plus 3. And how did I figure that out? I cheated. I did this first, and then I went and filled out my numbers. Okay, it's a little bit weird factoring GCF with tiles. So the hint is you ain't going to see it on a quiz or a test. But for those that like A's and B's, there is 2x, and here's the rest. Boom, 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 boom. So I would say here this is 4x squared plus 6x, and that equals, factoring out the GCF, 2x times 2x plus 3. Okay, there you go. All right, homework, pitter patter, get at her.